This is the part of the story that changes the temperature. Not because a court filing dropped on camera. Not because a detective held a press conference. Not because somebody finally posted a smoking gun that ends the debate in one clean screenshot. No. The temperature changed because the people around the story started sounding less afraid, less careful, and a whole lot more direct. And when that happens in any celebrity scandal, especially one this chaotic, the internet stops treating it like gossip and starts treating it like a countdown. So let's slow this all the way down, because the public conversation around Chrisean Rock is not just getting louder. It is getting sharper. And that matters. For months, most people could still write the entire thing off as messy social media noise. Chrisean Rock has lived in chaos for so long that chaos almost became the brand. Every week there was another live, another rant, another contradiction, another ugly fight, another clip people swore would be the one that finally brought consequences. Then the cycle would reset. New outrage. New headlines. Same feeling. Nothing ever really landed. But the reason this wave feels heavier is because the accusations are no longer coming from one corner of the internet. The pressure on Chrisean Rock is building from multiple directions at once. Family members. Reaction channels. Old clips getting resurfaced. People rereading old statements. People cross-referencing timelines. People asking why certain comments are being made now, not then. And when a story starts doing that, when it stops moving in a straight line and starts closing in from every angle, that is when viewers start believing something bigger may be happening behind the scenes. Now let's be responsible here. Online commentary is not proof, rumors are not verdicts, and public suspicion is not the same thing as evidence. That distinction matters. But it is also true that public narratives harden long before legal outcomes do. And right now, the public narrative around Chrisean Rock is moving in a direction that is very hard to reverse. At the center of it is the same question that keeps coming back no matter how many side arguments get thrown into the mix: why are more people speaking like they believe Chrisean Rock is running out of room? That is the real story. Because once a scandal changes from "people are talking" to "people close to the situation are sounding fed up," everything changes. The tone changes. The stakes change. The audience changes too. Casual viewers stop scrolling past it. They lean in. They start asking whether the person at the center of the storm has finally lost control of the narrative. And that may be exactly what is happening to Chrisean Rock right now. One of the biggest reasons this is snowballing is that the discussion is no longer limited to relationship drama. If this were just another chapter in the endless Chrisean Rock and Blueface circus, people would still click, still argue, still choose sides, and then move on. But that is not what this has become. The chatter has widened into questions about motive, family conflict, timelines, alleged cover-ups, and the way certain people may have benefited from one public story being accepted over another. That is why the internet is not treating Chrisean Rock like a simple reality TV train wreck this week. They are treating Chrisean Rock like a person standing at the center of a narrative that could turn from spectacle into consequence. And that is a dangerous shift. A lot of the renewed attention comes from resurfaced commentary around Ronnie, paternity speculation, and the claim that some people had reasons to want one version of events to be believed over another. Again, these are allegations, not established facts. But the reason they are hitting harder now is because the public is starting to connect motive, timing, and behavior into one ugly pattern. Whether that pattern is real or not will be for investigators and verified reporting to determine. But in the court of public opinion, Chrisean Rock is already paying the price of that pattern being plausible enough for people to debate seriously. And that word matters, plausible. A scandal does not need to be proven in the public mind before it becomes toxic. It only needs to feel coherent. It only needs enough puzzle pieces for viewers to say, hold on. This would explain a lot. Once people reach that point, every old clip turns into supposed context. Every contradiction turns into suspicion. Every emotional outburst turns into something darker in hindsight. That is exactly why old videos involving Chrisean Rock keep getting replayed with a completely different tone now. A clip that once looked like chaos now gets described as an accidental confession. A defensive rant from Chrisean Rock gets interpreted as panic. A contradiction from Chrisean Rock gets reframed as exposure. A moment that might once have been dismissed as impulsive oversharing suddenly becomes, why would Chrisean Rock even say that out loud? That is how a public image collapses. Not all at once, but through reinterpretation. And if you want to understand why the internet thinks the pressure around Chrisean Rock is different, you have to understand that reinterpretation is already underway. It is not just that people are criticizing Chrisean Rock. People are revisiting Chrisean Rock. They are auditing Chrisean Rock. They are going back through clips, comments, lives, meltdowns, and interviews looking for moments that now land differently. That is a terrible stage to reach if you are the person at the center of the storm, because once the audience starts reviewing your past like evidence, every old word becomes a fresh liability. Another reason the scrutiny is intensifying is that the emotional shield around Chrisean Rock appears weaker than before. For a long time, Chrisean Rock benefited from a familiar celebrity defense. People saw her as chaotic, damaged, exploited, unstable, impulsive, and constantly surrounded by the worst influences imaginable. That framing invited sympathy, even from viewers who disliked her. People could condemn Chrisean Rock's behavior while still seeing Chrisean Rock as someone swallowed by a toxic environment. But sympathy weakens fast when the conversation shifts toward alleged harm done to other people. That is the line the public never tolerates for long. Once viewers believe a scandal may involve not just self-destruction but possible damage to a child, to family, to someone vulnerable, the appetite for excuses vanishes. The internet becomes much colder. And Chrisean Rock is now facing that colder audience. Look at the reaction patterns. People are no longer asking only whether Chrisean Rock needs help. They are asking whether Chrisean Rock should be shielded from accountability at all. They are no longer debating whether Chrisean Rock is just reckless. They are asking whether Chrisean Rock is manipulative. They are no longer framing every ugly moment as another meltdown. They are framing some of it as strategy. That is a brutal change in framing. Because once the audience stops viewing you as the explosion and starts viewing you as the engineer of the explosion, your margin for error disappears. Then there is the family angle, which may be the most combustible part of this entire mess. Family comments do not automatically prove anything. Families can be biased, angry, misinformed, traumatized, or simply exhausted. But family comments hit differently because viewers instinctively assume there must be pain behind them. And when relatives or people connected to the situation appear less afraid to speak, it sends a signal that the silence phase may be ending. That is why the public is paying such close attention to every statement, every reply, every resurfaced clip, every alleged conversation, every quote that sounds like it was made by somebody who has simply had enough. Chrisean Rock is not just fighting internet gossip. Chrisean Rock is fighting the impression that people close to the fire believe it is finally safe to talk about the smoke. If that impression sticks, Chrisean Rock has a much bigger problem than one viral controversy. Because public perception loves momentum. Once momentum turns negative, neutral events start looking sinister. Silence looks strategic. Denial looks rehearsed. Anger looks guilty. Tears look manipulative. Even unrelated clips get dragged into the same vortex. And right now, Chrisean Rock is exactly the kind of public figure that vortex feeds on, polarizing, overexposed, unpredictable, and already associated with a long trail of chaos. That history matters. The audience does not evaluate a new allegation in a vacuum. They stack it on top of everything they already think they know. That is why so many people are saying the latest wave around Chrisean Rock feels believable to them, even if the hardest evidence has not been made public. They are not reacting to one isolated claim. They are reacting to the accumulated weight of the Chrisean Rock story. And that accumulated weight is enormous. For years, the Chrisean Rock storyline has been built on volatility. Fights. Breakups. Reunions. Public humiliation. Loud declarations. Public crashes. Sudden religious pivots. Defensive speeches. Online warfare. The pattern became so constant that outrage fatigue set in. People stopped expecting a turning point. But paradoxically, that same history is now what makes this moment more dangerous for Chrisean Rock. A public figure who has spent years normalizing drama loses the benefit of surprise when something serious comes along. People do not say, "No way." They say, "Of course something darker was underneath all of this." That may be unfair. It may also be exactly how public psychology works. And Chrisean Rock is learning that in real time. There is also the Blueface factor, which complicates everything. Any scandal touching Chrisean Rock and Blueface immediately becomes harder to read because both names already carry their own reputations for volatility, contradiction, and public mess. That means some viewers distrust everything around them. But it also means other viewers assume the worst because the pattern has been ugly for so long. So when Blueface enters the frame, the story does not calm down. It multiplies. Questions about paternity, image management, show business incentives, and who had reason to preserve which storyline become more explosive because people already associate both Blueface and Chrisean Rock with using public chaos as currency. And that is where this gets especially dangerous for Chrisean Rock. Once viewers believe the spectacle may have also served practical interests, every emotional decision starts looking transactional. Was this loyalty? Was it survival? Was it image control? Was it manipulation? Was it desperation? Was it all of the above? Those are the questions keeping the audience locked in. And those are exactly the kinds of questions that prolong a scandal, because they cannot be answered quickly. They spawn more commentary, more reaction videos, more clip breakdowns, more debates, more fan theories, and more pressure on everybody connected to the story. Another thing making this hit harder is the credibility gap. Chrisean Rock has spoken so much, so often, and in so many emotional states that consistency is no longer her ally. That does not mean every denial from Chrisean Rock is false. It means many viewers no longer grant Chrisean Rock the presumption of coherence. And for a public figure, that can be devastating. If the audience thinks you change your story with your mood, then even your truth gets discounted. That is one of the quietest disasters in celebrity scandal. Not when people prove you lied, but when enough people decide they cannot tell when you are telling the truth. At that point, you are no longer defending facts. You are defending your capacity to be believed. Chrisean Rock may be at that stage now. And once you hit that stage, even a technically smart statement can backfire. Too emotional, and people call it performative. Too calm, and people call it calculated. Too vague, and people call it evasive. Too detailed, and people call it rehearsed. That is what happens when the audience's baseline trust is gone. Then there is the child-centered conversation, which is the most emotionally charged layer of all. To be very clear, developmental or medical claims involving a child should be handled with extreme caution, and a lot of what circulates online is speculation, not diagnosis. But public discussion around parenting has become inseparable from the Chrisean Rock narrative. That alone raises the stakes. The moment a celebrity controversy gets tied to questions of care, neglect, responsibility, or vulnerability, the emotional response from audiences intensifies immediately. People do not engage the topic like ordinary gossip. They engage it like moral judgment. And moral judgment is much harder to outrun than ordinary scandal. A cheating rumor can fade. A nasty breakup can get repackaged as entertainment. A feud can become content. But once the audience thinks innocence may have been affected, they stop consuming the story as spectacle and start consuming it as indictment. That is why so many people sound unusually angry when discussing Chrisean Rock right now. It is not just fascination. It is moral disgust mixed with long-stored frustration. People feel like they have watched chaos be monetized for too long. They feel like warning signs were ignored. They feel like television, social media, and fan culture kept rewarding the meltdown until the meltdown got too ugly to excuse. And when an audience feels complicit for watching, they often compensate by becoming even harsher once they decide the line has been crossed. That is another reason the pressure on Chrisean Rock feels so intense. It is not just directed at Chrisean Rock. It is also fueled by the audience's anger at everyone who helped turn this world into content. The networks. The enablers. The friends. The family members who stayed quiet too long, whether for good reasons or bad ones. The people who kept filming. The people who kept reposting. The people who kept profiting. In that broader story, Chrisean Rock becomes both central character and symbol. And symbols absorb more punishment than people do. So where does that leave Chrisean Rock now? In the short term, it leaves Chrisean Rock in the most dangerous zone a public figure can occupy, the period where nobody outside can confirm the full picture, but a huge portion of the audience already believes the picture is bad. That is when every new clip becomes accelerant. That is when every associate gets watched. That is when every silence gets interpreted. That is when every casual comment becomes a headline. And if there really is an active legal or investigative dimension anywhere behind the scenes, public behavior during this phase matters even more. Because when somebody feels cornered, they often talk too much, lash out at the wrong person, contradict themselves, or create new problems trying to fight the old ones. That is why so many observers are watching Chrisean Rock's reactions almost as closely as the allegations themselves. They are not just listening for what Chrisean Rock denies. They are listening for what Chrisean Rock emphasizes, avoids, reframes, or suddenly changes. In scandals like this, people study the defense as if it were part of the evidence. Fair or not, that is where Chrisean Rock is. And here is the real nightmare scenario for any celebrity in this position: even if the worst accusations are never fully substantiated, the reputational collapse can still be permanent. Because brand damage does not wait for a conviction. Employers, collaborators, platforms, and casual audiences respond to risk, fatigue, and discomfort long before they respond to final legal clarity. That means Chrisean Rock does not need a formal worst-case outcome for the public consequences to become severe. Chrisean Rock only needs the story to remain toxic enough, long enough, and emotionally charged enough that people decide the name itself is not worth the trouble. That is how celebrity exile begins in the modern attention economy. Not with one event, but with cumulative revulsion. So when people say the pressure on Chrisean Rock feels different this time, that is what they mean. They are not necessarily predicting an immediate arrest, an immediate charge, or an immediate public downfall. They are saying the insulation looks thinner. The sympathy looks weaker. The denials look less effective. The outside voices sound bolder. The old clips look darker. And the audience is no longer consuming Chrisean Rock as pure chaos. They are consuming Chrisean Rock as a possible case study in what happens when years of dysfunction finally stop entertaining people and start alarming them. That is a brutal pivot. And if Chrisean Rock cannot reverse that pivot, then the next chapter may not be controlled by live streams, emotional speeches, or social media loyalty anymore. It may be controlled by whoever has the documents, the messages, the testimony, or the patience to let the story keep hardening in public. That is the part Chrisean Rock should worry about most. Because public opinion does not need certainty to become dangerous. It only needs direction. And right now, the direction around Chrisean Rock looks bad. Very bad. But here is the final twist: the louder the internet gets, the more important restraint becomes. If you are watching this story unfold, do not confuse commentary with confirmation. Do not confuse pattern recognition with proof. Do not confuse a viral consensus with a verified record. There may be real facts still hidden. There may be context missing. There may be people talking from pain, anger, revenge, or fear. All of that can be true at once. Still, one thing is undeniable: the public shield that once protected Chrisean Rock from total collapse does not look nearly as strong anymore. And once that shield cracks, the entire story changes. So now I want to know where you stand. Do you think the pressure around Chrisean Rock is finally becoming something real and irreversible? Or do you think the internet is doing what it always does, taking fragments, stacking them into a narrative, and declaring the ending before all the evidence is in? Because whichever side you land on, one thing is clear. This no longer feels like ordinary noise around Chrisean Rock. It feels like the point where the noise starts turning into consequence.